Hey guys, it's Adam Dracos from ThinkingWest. Today we're going to discuss Fulton Sheen's ideas about happiness and how we can achieve it. Bishop Fulton Sheen encouraged generations of the faithful through his radio and television broadcasts in the mid-20th century. He also authored a number of books which have continued to inspire readers today. In this video, we will dive into the work, Way to Happiness. Although relatively concise, the work is a goldmine of wisdom that can teach us much about living a more joyous life. Let's take a look. The Cause of Unhappiness. Before discussing what can potentially make us happy, it is useful to identify what causes the condition of unhappiness. According to Sheen, man is afflicted with a certain tiredness of the mind, his worries, anxiety, fear, and boredom. These feelings are the result of a tension in one's mind between what is possible and what is actualized. Sheen writes, "One basic reason for tiredness of the mind is the conflict in all of us between ideal and achievement, between what we ought to be and what we are, between longing and our having, between our powers and the incomprehensible mysteries of the universe." Sheen claims that ultimately we are searching for three things: life, truth, and love. These ideals do not exist in their full condition here on earth, yet we are constantly seeking them. He writes, "These three things are not to be found in this life in their completion. On earth life is shattered by death, truth mingles with error, love is mixed with hate. But men know that they would not long for these things in their purity if there were no possibility of ever finding them. So being reasonable, they search for the source from which these mixed and imperfect portions of life, love, truth derive. Our search for this source indicates that we were created for something higher than earthly goods, and our flailing attempts to obtain life, truth, and love here on earth is the cause of our unhappiness." Humility, the prerequisite for joy. The recognition that we will never achieve pure goods here on earth can be demoralizing. What is equally demoralizing is the realization that we ourselves are less than ideal creatures. However, this realization is the first step toward humility, which is the prerequisite for joy. Humility is a form of truth, one of the three ideals discussed previously. Sheen writes, "Humility is truth about yourselves. A man is 6 feet tall, but who says, 'I am only 5 feet tall,' is not humble. He who is a good writer is not humble if he says, 'I am a scribbler.' Such statements are made in order that there might be a denial and thus win praise. Rather, he would be humbler who says, 'Well, whatever talent I have is a gift of God, and I thank Him for it.'" As Sheen points out, to lie in order to appear humble is not humility at all, but the opposite, since the desired reaction is praise. The ultimate form of humility is surrender to God, to know that all good comes from Him. Sheen writes, "This perennial tension in man can be accepted and made bearable only by a surrender of the self to God. Then whatever happens is welcomed as a gift of love. Frustration cannot happen to us, for we have no clamorous, selfish will." True joy is not affected by external conditions. Since joy stems from humility, and humility is ultimately surrender to God's will, then it follows that joy can be experienced anytime God's will is being achieved. Since God's will is always achieved, one can experience joy at all times, in both the good and bad times. She notes that we feel joy in all times, not only for what we have, but for the things yet to come. He writes, "Joy can be felt in both prosperity and adversity. In prosperity, it consists not in the goods we enjoy, but in those we hope for, not in the pleasures we experience, but in the promise of those which we believe without our seeing. Riches may abound, but for those which we hope are the kind which moths do not eat, rust consume, nor thieves break through and steal. Even in adversity, there can be joy in the assurance that the Divine Master Himself died through the cross as the condition of His resurrection. This explains why a poor family crammed into a small hut can have more joy than a rich couple in a lavish mansion. The poor family's joy comes not from their current physical circumstance, but the recognition that whatever could be materially offered on earth is nothing in comparison to the riches that abound in heaven. The rich family, believing their wealth to be the pinnacle of human success, find it unsatisfying, and without a strong faith in God, they have nothing to hope for beyond what they have accumulated. Pleasure should be moderated. Pleasure is not the same as joy. When pleasure is experienced in large quantities too often, it can begin to have a negative effect. If you eat too much candy, you will feel a rush of initial pleasure, but your joy will quickly diminish as you nurse a stomachache. Sheen points out that by moderating our pleasures, we are able to reach a more stable state of joy. He writes, "The secret to a happy life is the moderation of pleasures in exchange for an increase of joy." In addition to moderation, self-discipline and initial hardship help us to reach higher forms of pleasure. Sheen writes, "The most intense and lasting joys come only to those who are willing to practice a certain self-restraint, to undergo the boredom of a preliminary discipline." Sheen notes that ultimately pleasure is not a goal in itself. It is usually encountered as a byproduct of obedience to a law. We experience the pleasure of eating because we are fulfilling the duty of feeding ourselves and thus sustaining life. We experience the pleasure of rest because we need to recharge after work. Sheen sums this up writing, "To seek pleasure regardless of law is to miss it." I touched on just a few topics that Sheen discusses in Way to Happiness. The book covers a range of subjects including raising children, teenage insecurities, and the value of work. Sheen clearly draws his ideas from a wealth of personal experience, and his concise writing style makes an impression on the reader. After reading Way to Happiness, I'm all the wiser for it. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. And as always, read on.